I'm a mess, I'm a mess, I'm a mess. Okay, so it all started back in May of 2020, the world's favorite year. I noticed my hands were weird. Essentially, they just felt swollen, like when you swim and your hands get kind of like overly watery. You guys have that too, right? Anywho, that's how they felt. It was getting harder and harder to open jars, wear my rings. It was a lot of energy to hold my phone up, and I couldn't make a fist anymore. I woke up one day and this was about the extent, like that was the closest I could get to making a fist. Obviously that's not, I don't go around making fists all the time, but you know, I'd like to be able to, it's such a weird problem that I was like, I'm not gonna go to a doctor about it, because how do I be like, hey doc, my hands feel weird? And I figured it would go away. Then my feet got swollen, and I was like, is there anyone pregnant? No. So I was like, okay, this is weird, my hands and my feet are swollen, it's probably stress because, you know, 2020. I was just kind of like, it's not gonna be a thing, whatever. Well, I woke up one night, in the middle of the night, in excruciating pain in just one of my limbs. I believe it was my arm the first time, where it was like 20 seconds of like 10 on the 10 pain scale, and I couldn't move, and it just hurt so bad to the point of tears, and then it went away. And I thought maybe I just slept on my arm weird. But then a few days passed and it happened again, but with my leg. And it would happen every so often days with my arm or with my leg, and it would either start in the elbow or in the knee and just kind of spread throughout that limb. And I was like, I think something's up here. But again, what kind of doctor do I go to about this? I ended up going to a chiropractor. I figured, hey, they know bones, right? So I went to a chiropractor and explained I'm having issues with my arms and my legs, my hands essentially. My feet weren't really bugging me at this point. And he took a look at my spine and said, oh my gosh, the vertebrae that essentially give blood flow to those limbs are super out of whack. So we fixed that, you should be fine, no medicine needed. I also have knee problems from high school when I danced all the time. He was even like, we'll even fix your knee problems, like it'll all be good in the head. I didn't say that because he's a doctor. I said that in my head because I'm not a doctor. But I was super excited. I left literally crying tears of joy because I was like, oh my gosh, I picked the right doctor to go to. There's gonna be some relief for me. This is fantastic. He said give it about 12 adjustments and I should be handy dandy. About adjustment 6, I was like, I'm not making progress. If anything, I'm getting worse. I'm not saying the chiropractor made me worse. It was just my body was adding on new things. It just seems like 2020, you know, every month it's gonna add something new to keep things fresh. I got to a point where my body would stiffen. If I sat in any position for 15, 20 minutes, and I'd go to move to a new position. So for example, if I were to try to like stand up out of my seat right now, I wouldn't be able to. My limbs would just stiffen up, they would lock, they would make sounds, cracks, pops, all that grossness. I couldn't really move, so that made me want to rest and sleep all the time. But sleeping was the worst thing because that meant my body was sedentary, so when I did have to get up, I couldn't. There were times where, this is so embarrassing, but kind of wet myself because I couldn't get up in time and my hands didn't have enough dexterity to pull down my pants. And that's just so embarrassing. Walking to the kitchen was exhausting. I said ow constantly. That was the word of the day. Every day, just ow, ow, ow. Car rides were hell because my whole body would lock in the car. Grocery shopping, I was walking really slowly. It was really hard to grab things, and I feel like because I look young and able-bodied and I look healthy, I know that people were kind of annoyed with me, like, why is this girl walking so slow? Pick it up. But I couldn't. So at this point, obviously, I'm thinking, you know, something's wrong. I was catching up with some friends. We were reminiscing about high school days, and I was like, my gosh, like, now we're all so old. You guys just, like, wake up in pain every day? And they're like, no. And that's when I went, oh, this isn't an age thing. This isn't a stress thing. This is something serious. Where do I even go with this? I contacted a teledoc because everything is virtual these days. I explained my symptoms. At this point, my body is pretty much useless. The only reason I could get out of bed is because luckily I'd built up a lot of core strength over the years. Because usually if your legs hurt, you can use your arms to prop yourself up. Or if your arms hurt, I mean, you stand on your legs anyway. I would have to use my core to wiggle myself to the edge of my bed and then roll off the bed and wait till I had enough leg strength to fully stand. So I told the teledoctor this. He immediately was like, go see a rheumatologist, which is not someone who studies rutabagas, unlike the name would imply. A rheumatologist is essentially a joint doctor, which I did not know existed, but makes sense. So I researched joint doctors near me, found one. I booked an appointment with her, again, a virtual appointment. She was pretty concerned and she's like, okay, I'm gonna send you over for some x-rays and blood work today. And I was like, oh. So I drove to the blood work place and of course had to park super far away, which is so cruel because I was in pain walking to the place that was supposed to help me get over my pain. Anywho, I spent an hour in the x-ray room. They did my wrists, my fingers, my knees, my elbows, like every joint in my body. Amazingly, my hips are fine. His hips don't lie. I got to be real good friends with the x-ray dude. He was awesome. And he explained to me afterwards, he's like, obviously your doctor's gonna go over the results with you, but from what I'm seeing in this just kind of initial look at, everything looks fine. So go do your blood work, but I really don't think you actually have any joint issues. Like all the tissues and tendons are where they need to be. So I was like, well, that was a waste of my time and money. A lot of money, by the way. But I made my way upstairs, of course, to the blood work area. Disclaimer, I abhor needles. They are my biggest fear in life. I hate them. It is an irrational fear, I acknowledge that. And before anybody comments trying to put ration to help me get over my irrational fear, please stop. People always say, oh, well, like, it doesn't really hurt, or just don't look at it. I'm like, no, it's an irrational fear. Your logic is not going to help. What happens in my brain is that I view my flesh as, you know, a solid thing, and the thought of something sharp penetrating my solid flesh, creating a hole that was not there before, and stealing part of me with it, aka my blood, which will take 30 minutes to come back to me. Like, that's creepy. That's creepy. Ugh. And then also just like getting shots even when they're not drawing blood. It's like, what are you putting inside me? You know, it's just creepy. I can't fully explain it, but it's disgusting. So I do not do shots willingly. I have to be held down and forced. It's essentially medical rape, for lack of a better word, because I hate needles. I talked myself out of getting all the vaccines to go abroad in college because I hate them that much. There was a meningitis outbreak at my college campus and I did not take the vaccine because I hate shots that much. There will be a vaccine for coronavirus eventually. Anywho, I get into the blood work place and I say to the guy, hey, just letting you know, I have a really big fear of needles. I'm gonna try my best to be mature and calm, but it's very likely I'm going to go into a panic attack. And in this moment, I realized that English is not his first language. He was just like, oh, it won't be a problem kind of thing. Like, you could just tell he didn't really take in what I said. And then I said, do you have a stress ball or anything? And he went, oh, you don't need that. I'm sorry, what? You don't tell me what I do and don't need. So then he looks at my chart and there's this caddy of about 9 or 12 different compartments, each with tubes with a different colored cap. And as he's looking at my chart, he's grabbing like at least 2, if not 3, from every category. And I went, are those all for me? At which point he went, I need backup! And this other nurse comes rushing over like, what's wrong? What's wrong? I'm in a panic attack. And her whole job is just to calm me down. She's like rubbing my back. She's like, talk to me. And I'm going, I'm only 25 years old and I'm a cripple and I hate needles. And she's like, And I'm like, this is the worst day of my life. Little did I know that day was coming. That was a lot of blood work done. And because everything is online, as tests came in, I'd get an alert to my phone. Now, I don't really know how to decipher medical charts, but from what I could gather, every test that was coming back looked normal and healthy. So I was just waiting for the test that was gonna come to be like, that's the one. And by the way, they did at least 30 tests on me, if not 30 to 40. I was right to be freaked out. Everything was looking normal, and then a mysterious test result came up. Assuming I had read it correctly, I tested positive for Parvo. Yes, Parvo, the disease shelter dogs get. I was so mad. I was like, all this time, I thought I was a cat person when I was quite literally a dog person. Anyone who ever called me a bitch was correct. And I was pretty pissed. I'm like, oh my gosh, that's like hearing you got rabies. Like, it's just, what? But I started researching Parvo after making a bazillion jokes about it and realized A, there's a human strain, and B, it's actually like would have been one of the best options for me to have because Parvo goes away on its own. You just need some extra bed rest and you don't get it again. So it would have just been this like weird Parvo occurrence that just yeets itself out of my life and I'm free to go. So I was actually like really stoked to have Parvo. I was like, yeah, I got the Parvs, you know, I'm like telling people, I'm like, I think I got Parvo, you know? So then I had my follow-up doctor's appointment and I was just so ready for my diagnosis. I'm like, she's gonna tell me I have Parvo. I'm gonna be like, cool, I know how to handle that. So she tells me your x-rays all look perfect. And I was like, yeah, I knew that. Now my blood work though, right? She's like, and your blood work also looks perfect. I went, what about Parvo? And she says, oh, actually Parvo has 2 different antibodies. You need both present to have Parvo. You just have one of the antibodies present. In fact, most people have that one present. So no, you don't have Parvo. Which, when you're like really excited to have Parvo, that was like a pretty big letdown. So then I'm like, what do I have? You did so many tests on me. Like, what is this? She says it's one of 2 things. Either it is very, very, very early signs of arthritis that are just too early to detect in the bloodstream. And if we check you again in like a year or 2, we'll probably start to see traces. Or more likely, it's this weird post-viral thing that we just don't know in the medical community because apparently that's a thing quite frequently and that's terrifying. But it's this weird post-viral thing that will go away on its own, but will last for about 6 months in totality, which is still a really long time to be dealing with the amount of pain I was in. But by that point, I was already in like month 3 or 4. So it's like, okay, it's not too much longer of this. I can handle that. But she's like, in the meantime, we're going to treat the symptoms and that will help us find the source. We're gonna try different pain medications. And if one works for you, we'll know that you have the ailment associated with that medicine. They started me with a basic pain medicine. It did nothing. Then they put me on a different pain medicine. That one helped a little bit. So then she put me on a steroid. So if you've been wondering why I look so buff, it's because I was on steroids for 6 weeks. And that's why I can make a fist now, and that's why I can move. Because before the steroids, I could not do anything. Like I said, pee my pants. So she put me on the steroid with the idea of if the steroid works, we're going to give you a different medicine that's not a steroid, but in that same family. So we kind of taper the steroid down, give you a different medicine, and that's a medicine you can stay on for a bit. So that's... So after just a few days of the steroids, I was feeling amazing. I was like, oh my gosh, I totally get why people do drugs. I can work out again for the first time in a long time, I can wiggle, I can open things. So I tell her, I'm like, this is working fantastically. She's like, great, we're gonna taper your dosage down a little bit next week, see how that goes. I'm like, you know what, I can feel the difference. I was starting to get a little bit of the pain back, but not a lot, definitely not what it was before. And I thought that would be like, whatever. And instead she got kind of concerned and was like, okay, let's keep monitoring that. And tapered it again. And I was like, yeah, when the dosage gets smaller, I feel more of the pain come back. She says, okay, so that proves that this is the medicine that works for you because you're reliant on it. And that means you have the ailment associated with that medicine, which is inflammatory arthritis. Obviously, that's not what I was expecting to hear. I was expecting to just switch over to a new medication. I was expecting something that would just last a few months and go away on its own. Inflammatory arthritis is an autoimmune disease. That means it lasts your whole life. Essentially, it means that my body, my immune system is processing my joints as foreign objects. So it's constantly trying to destroy them and get rid of my own joints, which would explain why I was in pain because my body is literally at war with itself. Why this happened all of a sudden, it's a combo deal. It is a combination of genetic background. I don't know who in my family has this, but there's some genetic marker somewhere, as well as environmental factors. Obviously, this is a crazy year, so it could just be stress from the year. I've had other stressors not related to the pandemic from this year. I also think It's possible I had corona back in January before anybody knew what it really was, because I was super sick then. So maybe I did have corona, maybe that triggered this. I don't know. The point is it's here and it's here to stay, so we have to do something about it. So hearing that I had something permanent was a lot to process at first, especially because I associate arthritis with elderly people. That's osteoarthritis. This is rheumatoid arthritis. Am I saying it right? I've said arthritis so many times now, it doesn't feel right. And it's something that, like, I always had a feeling I'd have arthritis at some point in my life because, like I said, my knees have been bad since high school, but I did not think it would be like this. And looking back, I do think that my knee issues weren't from dance like I assumed. I do think they were early signs of arthritis, because there was no reason for my knees to be acting the way they did so many years later. So I was taking all of this in, and I wish this is where I said the intensity stopped, but it was just kind of the jumping board for me, what was the craziest. So if I don't take medicine, what will happen is I'll just be in excruciating pain all the time, again, pretty much immobile, and I have a background in dance, tumbling, movement theater, rollerblading. I get mistaken for a personal trainer. I'm a very active person, so to be immobile would literally be a game changer. Also, I could risk having permanent joint damage and permanent disfiguration because I'm so young. There's so many years left where things could go horribly wrong. So I have to do something. I have 3 choices. There are 3 medicines that are your options, which doesn't feel like a lot, but like, okay, whatever. So the first one she tells me about is a pill that you take once a week. Okay, so far, so good. The catch with this pill is you can't drink while you're on it. Now, I'm not a big drinker. I don't really care about alcohol, but again, this is something I'd be on for life. So never drinking again isn't something I really want. There's such a stigma when you don't drink. People peer pressure you, and you always have to explain yourself if you say you're not in the mood. People don't just accept that. So if you're out with friends and they're like, why aren't you drinking? I have to say, like, oh, it's because I have inflammatory arthritis and I'm on this medicine that I can't drink on. Like, it's just kind of a mood killer. So I don't really want to deal with that, but I could deal with it if I had to. But the other thing with this medicine for people like me who are young females is you cannot have children on it, which do I even have to explain? I know everyone has different views, but for me personally, I've always been very pro-life. I've never wanted any other hormones inside of me affecting my reproductive health. I always want to feel like my body is a vessel for my future children. I've lived my whole life thinking about my future children, the choices I've made, the fact that I wasn't a partier in college, the fact that I didn't get into drugs or alcohol, like the fact that I was a good student so I could get good jobs. That was all because I want to create the best vessel for my future children. So I wasn't just gonna jump ship now after 25 years of that mindset. So how that works essentially is, if you do wanna have kids, you have to be off the medicine for, I wanna say it's 6 months, but it might be more like 3, before you can even start trying. And then you have to hope that you get pregnant the second you start trying, and we all know that's not how it works. Some people try for years, and then once you're pregnant, obviously, you can't be on it. When you're breastfeeding, you can't be on it. When you're pregnant too, that's the time you're gonna be in extra pain, so that's the time you'd want drugs the most. So it's just a totally impractical medication for somebody like me who will be wanting children in the next handful of years. So as she's explaining this to me, I obviously was like, no way in hell am I doing that. Let's hear the other options. Option number 2, you take twice a month. Cool. Also, there's like no side effects. The only real side effect is if you have kids, you have to wait 6 months before you vaccinate them because something would counteract. I don't know, that's fine by me. It's an injectable. Like I said, my biggest fear in life are needles. I hate them. And I get emotional when I think about them, and I know it's stupid, and then I feel stupid, so now I'm scared and feeling stupid. And again, this is a lifelong thing. This is a shot I'd have to give myself in the stomach or upper thigh twice a month, the rest of my life. There's the hope that you taper it down, but realistically, probably not exponentially. So what I've heard so far, my choices are give up a healthy motherhood, or confront my biggest fear every month for the rest of my life. Please tell me what the third option is. The third option is a regular pill that likely won't do anything for me, but we're welcome to try it just in case. I have no interest in wasting my time and putting medications into my body that aren't going to do anything. So I was freaking out, obviously, panic attack, crying at the doctors. She told me she's gonna give me 2 weeks to stay on the steroid in the meantime. At the end of 2 weeks, we have to know what your choice is. I spent the next few days just crying all the time. I'd cry on my lunch break. I'd cry in every phone call, every conversation. I was telling anybody who was around me because the more I spoke about it, the easier it became to speak about it. Obviously, it's still not easy because by hearing my family, my loved ones, kind of their advice, there'd always be somebody who would say, try acupuncture. No, 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 obviously no. And again, don't give me your reasons on why it's different than regular needles. For someone who has a needle phobia, it's the same thing. I also want to say, like, please, 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 in the comments, do not try to give me your advice on how I should be medicating myself, because I'm so overwhelmed, because that's what everybody does. You present a problem and people try to fix it. It's, you know, they're trying to be kind, but it's extremely overwhelming for me. I don't want to hear it. So what actually is nice to hear is to just acknowledge that my situation sucks and let me know that you're rooting for me along the journey, because there's no point pretending like this isn't a problem, because it is a problem. It will be a problem my whole life, and I have to be able to accept that. So it's a lot easier if you accept that too, and letting me know that you're along for the journey, as opposed to saying, like, we're gonna fix this, because it isn't something you fix. It's just something I learned to live with. It's something I learned to manage. So that's what I ask. Anyway, sorry, tangent. A lot of people gave their opinions, which was good and bad, and people are telling me join support groups, and people are saying do the pill, that's going to be so much better for you, and others are going, you should do hypnotherapy to get over your needle phobia, which I tried to do over YouTube, and that sent me into a 30-minute panic attack. I was also looking into cognitive behavioral therapy, and again, more hypnotherapy options to get over the needle phobia, because I was like, if I can get over the needle phobia, then there's really no problem with that option. My boyfriend is very much into like the natural way. He was saying there's dietary things you can do that will really make a difference if you know, avoid anti-inflammatory foods, and I bought a cookbook for that. The recipes are delicious, I'll give it that, but also really expensive. And when you're in pain, like, food sometimes is the only comfort, and so I don't really want to give up a lot of the things I really enjoy. Like, I want to be able to have ice cream and things like that because they bring me a lot of peace in a time when I'm not always feeling peace. So I'm kind of doing like a hybrid. I'm not being super strict. I'll probably peter in more of that. Also, I already have a really healthy diet to begin with the exception of my ice cream, I suppose. So I don't have much faith in that, but I'm willing to try it. So my doctor's appointment, the big question on everyone's mind. It's like The Bachelor, but instead of getting a man, I get medicine. Woo! And the ratings plummet. I had known from the moment she described the medications to me what I was going to have to pick, which is the injectable. I took that 2 weeks accepting that fact. I became so determined. I asked my brother, because when I was a kid and I'd have to get shots, he would hold my hand and he'd be my big brother. And so I call him crying, and I never call him crying. That's just not really our dynamic. And I was like, Drake, I need you. Like, I need to FaceTime you. I need to see your face. You're the only face that calms me down. That is his role specifically. And he was like, yes, of course. So I was like, cool. I have that on my side. There's also the issue of, I'm 25 right now. Next year I'm off my mother's health insurance. So I don't know how that's going to affect my medication, if I'm gonna have to switch careers to get a job with insurance just so I can afford to move. There are insurance options for people who don't get it through work. So that's most likely what I'm going to do, but I also have to be emotionally prepared to give up some things I love for the sake of basic mobility. That was such a pretentious tear wipe. I'm so sorry. Anywho, my goal was, okay, if I go into this telling myself, like, you're getting the shot because you were in so much pain otherwise, and because you are going to have healthy children and they're going to appreciate the fact that you sacrificed for them, and because you need to live a long and healthy life because so many people have invested in you and they deserve to see it through, because I have so many passions and I still have so much energy and I have so much to contribute to the world, so hell, I'm gonna do it. Obviously I was so angry and upset, but there's these little blessings that I got along the way. I just accepted, I do multiple jobs, and I accepted a short-term teaching assignment at a school, and I was like, oh my gosh, the day I found out I was immune compromised, I was like, I'm supposed to start tomorrow. Should I not be going into a school if I'm immune compromised? I was freaking out, but I went to go buy some clothes for work because my attire was not appropriate. And I was chatting with the guy behind me in line because the line was so long, and he was so lovely and nice, and we're just talking about teaching and we're talking about stand-up because that's what he does, and I was like, oh, like, I've done some stand-up too, and we're just chatting, and he just like, you know what, I'm gonna buy your clothes for you. And I was like, what? And he's like, I don't know, something's just telling me that I should buy your clothes for you. And I start crying again for like the millionth time, and I was like, I've had the crappiest day. Thank you so much. Like, you are an angel. What a good man. He asked for nothing in return. God does little things to remind you, like, even though the human body has its shortcomings, God is still in love with you and he's still rooting for you. And that gave me a lot of peace, that little gesture. And I try to keep my mind open for moments like that because there are a lot of those moments if you have your filter on for them. So yeah, I told my doctor, I was like, I want to do the injections. I want to try to do the first one on my own. And if I can't make myself do it, I will do the cognitive behavioral therapy. I don't know if my insurance will cover that, but I'll have to, because my fear is that I'll get the needle and not be able to make myself do it. And to anyone who says have someone else do it for you, that'd be way worse, because then I don't have control. I'm very determined, I'm very stubborn about it. That's how I have to be. I'll cry the whole time, that's okay. I'll have welts on my leg and I won't be as sexy on my tummy, but whatever. So that's where I'm at. So when people ask me how I'm doing these days, I feel really fake because I say I'm good. Because partially I forget who I've told and who I haven't told, but also because it's such a downer and it's something I'm going to obviously learn to live with. I just haven't quite figured it out yet. But I wanted to give everyone a heads up because I have a lot on my plate in addition to my health and the insane amount of health bills I have. I'm also working like 4 jobs right now, and I also have like hobbies and I have relationships. I have a lot going on. I haven't had much time to like work on my music or to just kind of be still. I'm just processing a lot these days. So I'm sorry if my communication is sometimes wonky. I apologize to anybody I was mean to when I was on steroids, because I legitimately got roid rage, and that was crazy. That was the moment when I was like, oh, this is why people stop doing drugs. I was so angry one day and my boyfriend's like, you have roid rage. I am currently not on the steroids anymore because I was so sick of how they were affecting my mood. I was just angry all the time. There's other side effects of steroids too, like weight gain and hair loss, which I was not down for. So I'm in this weird in-between where I'm waiting for my first shipment of needles to come through, and then I'll begin. So we'll see. And it could take a few months before that medicine really works. I'm already feeling my body start to go back to how it was in the beginning, where my hands are swollen. You probably can't tell, but I have swollen knuckles, super sexy. So I know this is real. This is me, exactly where I'm supposed to be. I'm a mess. I don't know a good way to end this video because this is still a journey, but that's where I'm at. So please just continue to rah-rah root for me, and know that if I am ever kind of off, it's because obviously I'm dealing with quite a bit, and I will be for a while until we find the right dosage and medication and all that stuff that really works for me. And with that said, have a lovely rest of your day / night, whatever time you're watching this. God bless.